But today we will talk about the hacker side. So welcome everybody, great to have you, and thanks for your participation in our talk today. My name is Jan. This is Mark. We will introduce ourselves then quickly in a second. And today we will talk about the shift from hack to login. What do you guys think? What will this talk be about? Do you have some ideas already? Something that comes to your mind eventually? Okay, then I hope.
Service accounts.
Yeah, very good. It's really going in that direction. What exactly about service accounts, maybe?
So it says overprivileged apps. So service accounts which have far-reaching capabilities which are beyond the scope of what it actually needs to do.
Yeah, I think that's a super perfect summary. Yeah. So we'll show you how easy it can be sometimes because it's getting more and more complex. We'll go a little bit the journey of how it all started and where we ended up today. So yeah, feel free. If there are any questions, just interrupt us and I'll do a little bit of the talking and then Mark will provide you a demo in the middle and then we will have a Q&A at the end as well. So perfect. Let's go to the next slide for a quick introduction. So Mark and I, you have 2/3 of our company, Kleeo GmbH, here. The third one, Thibaut, he's currently in Ghent. What we're actually doing is we do cybersecurity consultancy and crisis simulations. If you want to know more about us and what we do, feel free to reach out. Happy to give you any further details. And maybe the interesting thing is a little bit our background. So we're 3 people with all pretty different backgrounds. So Thibaut is really more the IT and data quality manager. Mark has a software development background, which is amazing. You will see that this is actually nice. So the hackers usually have a very techy background. And I started my career in the cybersecurity area. Okay, so let's get started. Who remembers this one? Okay, what is this?
It was a worm.
From when, roughly?
98.
Okay, worm from 98, almost, super. Anything else that you remember from this or that you have heard about?
Was it the VB script?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which copied itself?
Yes. Yeah, very good. It's one of the, if you can maybe, it's one of the first worms or virus that actually became known to the public because it was this I love you letter, and it's from the 2000s, so almost 98. And what was very nice is exactly as you said, it was a VB script and it actually allowed to do very easy propagation. I mean, back in the days, 26 years ago, the Outlook app wasn't what it is today and it was wrongly configured, so it allowed super easy propagation and it actually used you as soon as you clicked on it to actually propagate also to your recipient list. And so it used the trust of the people. And that's what a lot of attackers still do today. They actually use the trust that they already have. It's also an emotional trigger because it says, I love you. Now it's package. Of course, you never ordered something online, but still you get a package. So you have to check it out, what it actually is. You never know. And all it needed really back in the days was one click and you had massive propagation. And why are we showing you this? Because we wanted to give you a little bit of this overview of what it was back then and what it is today. Just that you will see when Mark does the demo, we're not that far away today, that something like this still works. It looks different. We're no longer using VB scripts. Maybe we're not using emails, but it's still fairly easy if stuff is wrongly configured. So let's look a little bit at the journey. When we now talked about the case from 2000, nothing severe actually happened. Yes, there was a little bit of downtime, maybe there was a little bit of destruction, but here it was really more for the lols. People loved about it. I think maybe we still know it from school, maybe depending on age of all of us, but when we were in school, what we did, we had a batch script that maybe opened solitaire 100 times, and you couldn't use your computer anymore, but it was fun. So it actually transitioned from being fun to really becoming an issue for global enterprises. So in 2000, we had this user who clicks the attachment. roughly in the 2010s, we had seen a lot of increase in phishing emails where people were actually keen of getting your login credentials. A lot of fake login pages where you would enter your username and password. Somebody could log in. In the 2020s, it was really more on the identity itself. So stealing identities, using tokens, reissuing tokens, having long-lived sessions, and so on. And really today, where we are, exactly to your point, what you have just mentioned, it's really the service principles, the apps that actually get a broad access. And what we should not forget is what's now coming more and more, AI agents. Because all of them have a privilege, have a scope, can do stuff, and if not monitored correctly, can lead to a big issue in our corporate environment. Because every integration that we have needs an identity these days. I think this sounds very familiar to all of you. So we have CI/CD pipelines that actually you can do a lot of automation. But of course, in order to do automation, you also need the right privileges. We have GitHub, we have SaaS connectors, we have automation scripts, API tokens, AI agent, all of it connected to your environment, all with different privileges, different scopes. Nobody has an overview anymore what has actually been done. And the problem is also, you have this in production, but you also have this in development, in test environments, sometimes even combining the two because, yeah, you know, we all know we should actually segment and segregate, but in the end, it's still easier to test with real data than if we just have a developer environment somewhere without any real data to test. And this is increasingly becoming an issue. Because every identity, as we said, it actually needs an owner, so somebody who's responsible for it. It's becoming a scope, an expiry, and it needs monitoring. Sounds familiar because this is exactly what we also had back in the days for identities, our user identities. This is where we actually started to become really good at. But now with all of those SaaS integrations, with all of those AI agents coming, it's not that easy anymore, and we need to have another focus on it. Yeah, as we care today, that's exactly as I just mentioned. We have a name for this. It's called non-human identities. Are all of you aware of those non-human identities? Have you ever heard this term before? So that's more or less the term that comprises all of those identities that do not belong to users, but you can still give them the same or similar access rights that you can also give to users. And it's also something that you have to take care of, especially if you have SaaS integrations. Not saying that it's bad, but the SaaS integrations, of course, they also need to be governed. Good. Then an issue is, of course, as well that most of them, unlike users, they cannot use MFA. Think about you have a technical user identity that needs to access data somewhere, and each time it actually tries to do so, it would prompt an MFA prompt.
Every API call.
Or an API call. So you could actually say that's an issue because that's how we started to protect user identities by saying, okay, you just need to register everywhere with MFA. You have your hardware token. Ideally, you have a YubiKey. You should more or less be okay. It does no longer work in this setup. Good. And now you think, okay, this sounds, you know, yeah, pros will not do this correctly. But we have been proven wrong. And I think Mark will now tell you a little bit more and give you a concrete story about it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jan. So, yeah, as Jan has mentioned, all this theory, all this what could happen, etc., etc., we thought, yeah, it would be good to look at the real life example. And who better to look at than somebody like a player like Microsoft? Because Microsoft in 2024, they had an incident where hackers actually got access to executive emails, documents, attachments to those emails containing very sensitive data. And everybody's like, oh, what's happened? What is Microsoft doing, etc., etc. And in the aftermath, what came out, and what we see here on the right, this is an analysis from Wiz of the whole incident, is that, yes, the initial access point was a human identity. Just some test accounts they left laying around somewhere. Or no, they did a password spray and yeah, eventually found out the password. But the problem here was that there were legacy OAuth apps configured on this tenant where this user was compromised. So this is this OAuth app. The good thing was this was on a test tenant. So Microsoft has, I don't know how many, hundreds, thousands probably test tenants. So yeah, no big issue, right? Well, the issue was at that time that this OAuth app sadly had access to, or had rights, had permissions on the actual corporate Microsoft tenant, which allowed this OAuth app to create another non-human identity on that productive tenant with wide-reaching rights, for example, to read emails. And that's exactly how the attackers came from pretty much seemingly innocent identity through these OAuth apps to the corporate productive tenants and compromise Microsoft that way. And yeah, why we chose this example is these systems with these OAuth apps and these service principals, these NHIs accounts, setting this up correctly is pretty tricky. I mean, on a small scale, it's quite easy. The principles are pretty clear. But if even Microsoft fails to implement this correctly for a technology that they developed, I mean, go figure, right? So yeah, so we figured we would show you today real quick live how this could happen and how such a flow could look, and also give you a bit of a message. Okay, what can you look into? What can you take away with you to address this potentially also on the tenants that you are on or in other clouds that you're active. So let's jump right in. So what we're going to do for this demo is pretty much the same thing that happened to Microsoft. The only small difference here is we're just going to use one tenant, one test tenant. We're not going to escalate to another tenant because, well, it's a demo, and we're going to use slightly different privileges than the attackers are used actually. The attacker used far wider privileges than we're going to have today, but I'm going to show you what kind of privileges we're using. But otherwise, the flow is pretty much the same. So what we're going to do is we have this enterprise application. It's called in Azure, or an NHIs, which represents some kind of app. You can think of a SaaS application or an in-house application you're developing. You need an identity for it, something like that. This application has secrets associated with it. These secrets, in this case, has been compromised. So we can assume, for example, somebody accidentally checked it into a Git, it got leaked somewhere, or somebody was socially engineered, and the attackers got these credentials that way. What we're going to do is we're going to look at what kind of rights does this non-human identity have, and what can we do with it. There's slight spoilers on here, but I'll show you during the demo. All right. First things first, I'm going to show you the NHIs portal real quick. This is our test tenant. And what you can see here is we created this 9 TechTalk app registration. So this is just for today, of course. If you look at the app registration, I don't know if everybody's familiar with app registrations here, but what this is pretty much just, for example, if you develop a SaaS application, you can create an app registration which represents that application in NHIs, and you can give it permissions and secrets and whatnot. And what this app registration can do, if you look at the API permissions it has, is it can read and write applications on this tenant, and it can create app role assignments. What this means is, yeah, we'll see, but pretty much this application can create other applications, and I'll show you why this is a problem. If we jump over real quick, we're going to go to Postman. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to call the Microsoft Graph API. So this is just the backbone or the backend for Microsoft where all the data can be retrieved. Not too important, but I'll just show you real quick. I'll do a call to /service principals. What this does is we're reading the service principal or app registration data of this app registration that I just showed you previously. So just looking at the app registration, what kind of data does Microsoft store in the backend? About this, we can see here, for example, the name is, it should be somewhere. Yeah, 9 TechTalk is the app display name. We can see this in the portal as well. Otherwise, I mean, on a first look, well, a lot of techie gibberish, but let's dive a bit deeper. We also have another API where we can check out what kind of role assignments does this have. So yeah, in this scenario, right, we assume we got this app registration information from somewhere, Git or I don't know, initial access broker or wherever. So as an attacker, I would like to find out what can I actually do with this. And Microsoft provides APIs for this, which is quite handy. So if I read the app role assignments for this app registration, I can see I have two assignments. We saw that in the portal as well. Here in the API response, it's a bit less clear what this actually does. And we can see here the resource display name is Microsoft Graph, so something related to Microsoft Graph. The resource ID is, I don't know, and yeah, it's a bit unclear. But what we can do, we can use another API to actually translate this. And sorry, if it works. And what this will do, one sec, what this will do is tell us exactly what we actually can do. Okay, it's not working. But what we could see here is that these IDs, these app role IDs that we had in here, these two, correspond to these exact Graph API permissions. That's pretty much all there is. So from this, an attacker can know, okay, I can read-write applications that are owned by me. I could also read-write app role assignments. Now, for somebody not as deep in the rabbit hole as I am, it's probably don't really know what this means, but I'll show you. No worries. We're still in the early stages, so an attacker still is not sure what they can do. They're still a bit iffy. Okay, what is this even useful? What they can do at this point as well is they can check out what kind of NHIs roles they have. In this case, this app registration has an application developer role associated with it. What we can also see is the scope is tenant-wide, so this app registration has this specific NHIs role for the whole tenant. Yeah, don't really need to go into detail here, but what this means is this app registration can create other app registrations, pretty much, similar to what the Graph did. So now, as an attacker, I can just try and create an app registration. Because this app registration, if I want to, for example, read emails, doesn't really help me because I don't have email.read.something. If I want to change Exchange Online settings, for example, I don't have that right with this app registration. However, I do have the right to create app registration. So let's just create an app registration. You can see one single call, and we just created a new app in NHIs. We'll see it in here at some point. I'll just continue on. But what just happened is we just created a new non-human identity using a non-human identity. No person, whatever, has seen this or got an info about this if it's not set up, of course. And this can all be automated quite easily. And in the background, yeah, as I said, a new non-human identity was created. This is an Azure quirk. We just need to create a service principal for it as well, but not too important. I'll just see if it shows up. It does not yet show up. We have some latency there. That's completely normal. And now our non-human identity is pretty much complete. Pretty simple, right? What's now missing is that this non-human identity doesn't have any permissions. We can't do anything with it yet. Yeah, so we figured, why not read some emails? And you will see, because we can manage this first non-human identity we're using here to create another non-human identity, because it can change and manage all other non-human identities it creates, it can just give permissions to that one that it created. So it's pretty much free to do whatever on the tenant. And to showcase this, what we're going to do is we're just going to add a single role or a single API permission, which is Mail.Read. And with this 600 millisecond API call, what we've granted this non-human identity is the possibility to read all emails of this complete M365 tenant. And yeah. Now, one small thing that we forgot is that we also need something to authenticate towards the tenant. So we need a client secret or a certificate. I'll just create the client secret real quick. We can see here there's a secret text. I hope it's showing up in the... Come on, Azure. Work with me here. Okay. Ah, there it is. So it's called the 9 TechTalk Privileged SP. This is the non-human identity I just created. And if you see here the API permissions, as I mentioned, we can see Mail.Read. This provides mail reading permissions across the whole tenant. And we can also see, we should also be able to see the client secret I just created. So this is the one we use to authenticate. And then we're pretty much ready to go. Yeah, I'll try to read some emails. We have a test mailbox on this. She's called NHIs, and we'll just call the Graph API to give us some emails. And you can see here we have just received the inbox of this user on this tenant. We can see here some guy. I'm not going to name names, has sent her some passwords, so that this allows us to propagate further. Of course, it's not a real password, don't try it. But yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to show you, and how easy it is to do these things in very quick succession. And I mean, this whole flow can super easily be automated. Of course, the big elephant in the room here is we had a non-human identity to start with quite privileges. So that's just as a caveat. Coming back real quick with this demo, what do we actually want to say with this? What are the takeaways? So what we want to say is treat these non-human identities who have privileged access like you would a privileged normal user account. It sounds very obvious, but it's something we don't really do. Then also avoid broad graph permissions, but also in other clouds, right? Avoid broad management permissions. Doesn't really matter if it's Graph API or if it's an IAM role in AWS or whatever. Then also don't really give automation identities or non-human identities the right to grant permissions to other non-human or human identities. It's a big no-no. And one of the big points that I want to give or present here is review these regularly. It's something pretty much nobody does. Yeah, it's a huge pain, especially for bigger tenants where you have hundreds and hundreds of these non-human identities. But it's something that needs to be done because otherwise it's just an open door potentially. Then of course, scoped access, short-lived credentials, managed identities, always preferred. It's not always possible depending on what you want to do. And one last thing, of course, is also logging and alerting on app creation, secrets, secret creation, new role assignments on non-human identities is always something we recommend as well. Good.
Can I ask something?
Yes, please do.
If you could only implement one of these 6 rules, which one would you pick?
Ooh. I mean, I think for the immediate, if you're sitting in front of a tenant that has X non-human identities, I think I would go with the review, to be honest. just to go through each and every one of them, look at what kind of permissions, what kind of privileges do these non-human identities currently have, and trying to figure out, do they actually need them? But in general, I would say these are very different kind of things, right? I mean, avoiding broad permissions and treating every app registration like a privileged account is more like a mindset. It's not something you do every day, right? And the review is just something you do regularly.
How can you prevent that leakage or the access to these API keys? So the only thing what happened is everything was correct, what was done, except it was the hacker who got to the API key.
Yes.
Or the rest was working as expected.
Yes, you're very right, and I would really love to give you one answer.
So, I mean, it could be so many ways.
Yes.
But how can you do it on the infrastructure level? This is what I mean. Not the human engineering, social engineering, phishing mail. I'm not talking about that. But here on your tenant, how could you kind of make it more controllable?
Yeah, what we usually, or what we often do is, we work with short-lived secrets. So not secrets who are indefinite, and if leaked once, the whole tenant is completely compromised and everything burns down. But also working with services like, for example, Key Vault and similar services where you can put your secrets and your certificates, and where they're centrally managed, and where you can very granularly control who can access them and what way. Is also something that I would certainly recommend, also to prevent certificates, secrets from landing on some kind of workstation or being shared in files or whatever, right? But I mean, it's so much broader, this topic. This is just the two things that came to mind.
Maybe you could also invest in a security tool that also helps you with scanning of secrets, because this would also alert you if it gets actually leaked.
I mean, for actual software development, that's 100%.
What you could also do is like move the secrets in the infrastructure, like have a service mesh, and the applications don't know anything about credentials.
Yes.
It's all handled by the infrastructure. And the other thing, the example from Microsoft, I think was also happened there is like they didn't have different tenants or projects for different environments.
Yes.
What you would usually do would you have one environment, one cloud project for test or for integration, and another one for production. So they cannot even talk to each other. They are like decoupled from each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I think, if I remember correctly, right, that it was also some spillover from some tests they did years past, and it was just a mess. I mean, it should have been two separate tenants, but somehow the permissions got intermixed. And I mean, things like this happen, right? In reality, I mean, one wrong kind of configuration, one wrong click, and it's there, and you might not notice. It's just how it is.
Point 7 that you haven't mentioned is look at your test environments.
It's a very good point. Yeah, absolutely.
Because if I'm just looking at my prod environment, everything's fine, but that's actually the test environment that allows privileged access to leak.
100%. 100%. Any more questions? Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you.